well. Lorenzo Carter. He was a big part of AJ Green's recruitment. He was I mean, if you go back over time and look at all the guys that McClendon has brought in, it's a really significant bunch. So great job by Kirby Smart getting him back home. I'm also curious to see what his official job title ends up being, because he was Mario Cristobal's passing game coordinator at Oregon and then moved to Miami with him and took a role of kind of co-OC. I don't think he was going to be the main play caller by any measure, but definitely was going to have an influence in the offense, and be curious to see if Georgia is planning on giving him a role that's similar in that sense, where, he has an opportunity to put his fingerprints on some things schematically and have some influence on the playbook and situational calls. And, as a receivers coach, I'm sure he'll certainly have some say-so in some personnel matters. And, the receiver rotation was obviously a point of contention for certain people. I know it's something that Josh and I talked about a good bit on our show in between the SEC championship game and the college football playoff, because Georgia, was playing 8, 9, 10 guys at receiver, and nobody was getting more than about 20 or so, maybe 25 snaps a game, including Jermaine Burton, who just left to go to Alabama. And, it seems like a lot of that decision, at least according to people who were kind of plugged in to his thought process there, was that he wasn't getting enough targets, getting enough snaps and reps and looks to put up the type of numbers that he felt like he would need to put up to go round one. Counter to that is that George Pickens just missed this entire season, played in 3 games, had a couple big catches in those 3 games, but was always on a snap limit, was never, full go like we were used to seeing him his first and second year in Athens. And he is being projected as a first-round pick in a lot of mock drafts. We'll see how that works out in April. So interesting times, a lot of conversation around the offense. Stetson Bennett decided to come back since the last time I've talked to you guys, which I think there is a misnomer maybe that Stetson, I don't know, is guaranteed the job. I think that's kind of the impression from a lot of folks. And then the flip side is that on the heels of that news that he was returning, JT Daniels decided to leave. And so, I've seen some people go so far as to say that Stetson was selfish for coming back because it caused JT Daniels to leave, and some pretty, bold takes, I guess, to say the least. But I think the reality of the situation is that, if you're a Georgia fan, I think JT Daniels was probably leaving either way. And so, my intel is that there had been enough things that have happened kind of between him and that staff. And he had sort of, lost maybe some of his following in the locker room. Jermaine Burton obviously was still Team JT, right? We heard that they might be a package deal in the transfer portal. So I'm not saying anything is absolute, because nothing is ever absolute or black and white. But there was definitely some stuff that went down there that, caused him to feel like it was time to seek another situation, although we haven't seen him officially transfer yet. So I guess there is still the possibility he could come back to Georgia. I don't expect that to happen by any means at this moment. I don't have any intel or anything like that I'm not sharing with you guys. I'm just saying it is something that is within the realm of possibility, right? But yeah, I mean, I think as we move forward, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of focus on that wide receiver room and what the wide receiver classes look like under Brian McClendon. Because Cortez Hankton, I think, not a all-world receiver coach, but I think he did a better job than a lot of people gave him credit for. I really do. And looking back now at kind of some of the conversations around him, I think a lot of people have been tough on him. And he did not recruit his room to the same standard that, say, Trey Scott is recruited on the defensive line, or the previous defensive backs coaches have recruited. I mean, they're, or the offensive line for that matter. Like, he, did not bring in a ton of studs, but also if you go back and look at the 2019-2020 recruiting class, you see Arian Smith, Jermaine Burton, Marcus Rosemy, the class before that, Dominic Blaylock, George Pickens. So I think Georgia's had a lot of bad luck in the wide receiver room to a certain extent, with injuries and guys that they thought were going to be there not being there. So keep that in mind, right? Like, as we talk about this, as we judge this, I think, to be fair to Hankton, at least that should be mentioned. But you look at what McClendon did. He brought 2 of the top 8 wide receivers in last year's recruiting class to Oregon. I can promise you that Georgia is a much easier place to recruit to than Oregon, and especially now with a national title ring. I mean, the beast is going to be unleashed from a recruiting standpoint, and Georgia is going to become a even more dominant force on the recruiting trail than they already are, which feels pretty wild to say when you consider that Kirby Smart has already signed, a number 1 class in his time in Athens. But I think that it's going to get even scarier, even more impressive over the coming months. So something to watch for. But I think, the whole receiving conversation, it all comes back to Stetson Bennett, which, ends up creating something that a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about. My personal opinion is that there's limitations that Stetson Bennett has as a quarterback. He is not a transcendent talent like Trevor Lawrence or a Joe Burrow, or some of these guys that you've seen. But I think he's a very good quarterback who keeps the offense on schedule. I think that probably the best thing he does is get the ball downfield, which is attractive to a lot of wide receivers. And, I think the thing to really look at with receiving and recruiting going forward is not just what does Georgia do on offense in 2022, where I think that Georgia will have to score more points in 2022 than they did in 2021. They will not have the same defense they just had. I think the defense will still be very good, but this was a historically good defense that Georgia trotted out in 2021. So something to watch for there is just kind of, how the cookies crumble a little bit. But I think that Georgia you'll probably see more of Stetson Bennett's skills if he is the starter in 2022, just because Georgia will need to keep the offense open for much more of the game than they did in this past season. So, but yeah, when you talk about recruiting the next classes, it's like, who are the other guys that are coming that these receivers are going to get to play around? Is a guy like Arch Manning going to sign on, or another 5-star quarterback where these guys look at them or maybe they've gone to some of these recruiting camps with them and they know what he can do, and they know that he can make them look good. And they know if they get separation downfield that he's going to throw a frozen rope to them and put it on a dime. So all that is, stuff to consider when kind of sussing all this out and talking about it and thinking about it. I do think that Georgia is, you're already seeing kind of some of the benefits of this national title payoff for UGA. Nolan Smith returning is a really, really great thing. Kind of having the opportunity to come back and be the leader on the defending national champions obviously was attractive to him. The coaching hires, going out and getting all these, getting McClendon, getting Bobo to come, which I know Bobo's a UGA alum and he has relationships with Muschamp and he has relationships with Kirby Smart, but bringing those guys back to Athens, and in Bobo's case, he turned down quarterback coach opportunities. He turned down other on-field coaching opportunities reportedly to come back to Georgia. So I see that as a very big statement in the affirmative for what Kirby Smart's doing. And some coaches with good experience wanting to be a part of it. I mean, Brian McClendon, truthfully, just from a recruiting standpoint, at least, there's not many guys out there in the wide receiver coaching world that you would rather want. I mean, maybe like Brian Hartline from Ohio State, but I don't know what else. I really don't know who else you're really wanting over him. I mean, just if you look at the guys that he's put in the NFL, if you look at the guys he's recruited, I mean, the end of the Richt era, if you imagine it without Brian McClendon, it gets a little bit scary because there's no Sony Michel, there's no Nick Chubb, there's no Keith Marshall, there's no Todd Gurley, there's no Isaiah Wynn, there's no DeAndre Walker, there's no Isaiah McKenzie, there is no Reggie Carter. I mean, there's a lot of guys that he has his fingerprints on as the primary recruiter, and then that's before we even talk about the secondary relationships. So big deal there for Georgia. I think Georgia's recruited really well over the last couple of years. They've had top 3 classes, but they haven't always gotten like their guys, maybe in the sense of the guy that they really, really wanted and that they were on from the start of the recruiting cycle, especially on offense, hasn't always ended up in Athens. So be interesting to see if he's capable of kind of turning that tide a little bit. We'll take some questions and chat a little bit. I see we've got one here, so I'm going to start adding some of you guys in as speakers, and we can fire away. And whatever you guys want to talk about is on limits. UGA PRRTHD, you have been added as a speaker. How's it going?
It's going good. A couple of statements and then a question for you.
Absolutely.
First of all, welcome home, BMac.
Yeah.
God, that's a great ad. Bobo, come along. Don't bring a green notebook. Second statement is Coca-Cola. You got to step your game up. 1980 blows 2021 out of the water. Step up, Coca-Cola. They're your home team. My question for you, Graham, and thank you for taking my call, is,
of course,
with our seniors graduating and the early declares for the NFL, have we recruited deep enough to replace the defensive front 7?
Oh, man. So, I mean, you're not going to replace guys like Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall. I mean, you can reload in a sense, or you can bring guys in, but you're just not going to get that level of play out of your front 7 again next season. I mean, when you look at how Georgia's recruited, I think they've recruited about as well as you could want or hope to. But I don't think that they've recruited, quite well enough to just say we're going to replace these guys, because some of those guys are, we've not never, but I mean, we rarely see a Jordan Davis in football, right? I mean,
exactly.
You just rarely see a 330-pound guy that can chase a running back down and beat him to the sideline, right? I mean, Devontae Wyatt is another guy where I think really unsung, but there were some games like the Tennessee game where he was just so disruptive, and he's another guy who's just a freakish athlete. Jalen Carter is another one of those. He's a first-round talent, right? I think that he's a guy that, as good as he is, and I think a lot of people kind of saw him even amongst that crew that was in Athens this past season as the most talented defender or defensive lineman on that team. But he'll have to be an anchor. He'll be a starter. It will not be as much rotation and kind of breaks for him. He's a guy they're going to rely on heavily. But there's guys that they've, like, if you look at the way that Georgia played on defense this past season and the way they've really played on defense under Kirby Smart, there's a lot of guys who've played a lot of snaps for Georgia on the defensive line. Zion Logue has played a lot of snaps. Trying to go back through some notes here and kind of look at some of these some of these snap counts for UGA. But I mean, there's a lot of guys who have some experience, but there's a lot of guys that are going to need to step up.
Who's our junkyard dog next year?
In what sense?
As in the biggest defensive disruptor on the field.
It's either Jalen Carter or it very well could be Dumas Johnson. He can play outside or inside linebacker. We saw him, with the pick 6 against UAB his first game. But the people that I've talked to who are well plugged in and would know say that, in practices at the end of the year, it seemed like the light really came on for him. And he was, out there making the type of plays that some of these other guys that we watched on the field were making in games. He was doing that in practice. So I think that we'll, see a lot of him, and it'll be curious to see if he ends up at inside backer or outside backer. But, I like the Tramel Walthers and Logue we were just talking about, Nazir Stackhouse, like some of these guys, Warren Brinson, they've been getting snaps, they've been getting experience, and they'll have to step up. Tresman Marshall is one of them, Timon Mitchell on the defensive line. And I mean, you have some recruits coming in, like Bear Alexander. I know he just had a shoulder surgery, I believe it was, but he's a guy that fits kind of that Devontae Wyatt mold. Michael Williams, absolute freak. Marvin Jones Jr. can be that guy that's disruptive off the edge, kind of that Adam Anderson sort of presence. Nolan Smith, I mean, there's plenty of talent there. It's just, will they emerge in the time frame that Georgia needs them to? And I mean, I think that a big thing will be that Oregon game. I think Georgia will, have to get through that test, and then they'll have a little bit of a chance to kind of settle in and see some of these guys develop, and hopefully the light comes on before they get to the meat of that SEC schedule in late September and early October.
And last comment, seriously, if you've got any contacts in Coca-Cola, tell them they're embarrassing themselves. I've got a 6-pack of the 1980s sitting on my mantle, and I can't imagine putting a 6-pack of what they're offering now. That's just an embarrassment.
So I don't have any contacts at Coca-Cola, but I have been told, and I don't know if this is a rumor or if this is actually true, but the word has been that they are planning on putting out like a full design bottle, I think in April, but they just put these mini ones out to kind of satisfy the demand right after the national title. So hopefully that's correct, and we get the full, the full workup like you have. Because I have some of the 1980 Coca-Colas as well. They've been passed down, or I'll stop into like a random antique store in the Appalachians and find them. I've always collected them. So
damn,
yeah,
you're making me feel old, Graham.
What's that?
You're making me feel old, brother.
Well, hey man, I didn't mean it like that, but you find them around.
Hey, thanks for the call.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening. Have a good evening.
You too.
World Series champ DA, we got you rolling in here. And I'm gonna bring my guy Dog Stats on if you wanna hop in here, Josh. World Series champ, Drew Aspinwall, I believe. You were on.
Graham, how we doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, man. So what's your thoughts on how we're going to utilize Darnell more this year? We think we're going to split him out more, or try to hit him over the middle, kind of this 3-point stance, or we going to try to get him in the slot? What's kind of your thoughts how we're going to try to use Darnell, or if it's kind of similar the way we've done this last year, kind of more of a block in and set it up in a 2 tight end set with Brock?
Yeah, so I mean, I think first and foremost, if you could tell me how the offensive line is going to play, I'll have a much better, idea. Because if the offensive line is good and they're able to play just, straight up with that front 5, and they don't need him helping and chipping as much, then I think there's a lot more potential to flex him out and put him out wide and do a lot of things that we saw them do more so his freshman year than we did this year. But I think it's important to remember when we talk about Darnell that he was, hurt at the start of this year, and he had that injury. I think it was a foot injury, if I recall correctly. And that's a tough injury for a guy that's 280 to get over. So, I think there's a reason why when he returned to the lineup, we saw him blocking a lot more, and credit to him, for being a willing blocker. But I think that in 2022, you're probably going to have to rely on those tight ends, maybe even more than you did this year, just losing Burton, losing Pickens, losing some of these guys. So it'll be interesting to see. But I would say if I had to put my money on it right now, I think you'll see him flexed out more. I still think you'll see him block plenty and do lots of the great things that he does in pass pro and in the run game. But just because the receiving core across the board, whether that's tight ends, running backs, you don't have James Cook next year, who he took a lot of targets in the passing game as well. So I think there's more balls to go around. But one thing that's interesting, I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, actually, is like, if you look at some of the kind of, the gripes, I guess, of the Georgia fan base right now, it's like a lot of people are complaining that, Georgia hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since Terrence Edwards, and that's why Jermaine Burton left. And, there was some article that was put out by Dog Nation, and they were talking to some of the top wide receiver recruits from this past class that didn't decide to come to Georgia. And one of them made a comment about, like, the tight end shouldn't have 800 receiving yards. But yeah, it's like a lot of people are also mad that Darnell's not getting enough touches. At the same time, they're mad there's not a 1,000-yard receiver. So it'll be interesting just because there's only so many balls to go around. I mean, I think if the Georgia defense is struggling and is in a lot more close games, then all those numbers go up for everybody. But yeah, I would expect Darnell. I know there was some talk of him potentially transferring. It seems like he's staying for now. Doesn't mean he couldn't leave after the spring semester if he ultimately decided he wanted to. But I think you're going to see him featured probably in a lot of different ways. I would imagine there's probably been some conversations about how they can get him a little more involved as a pass catcher. But the tough thing about him is that if he decided to just go for it and be an offensive tackle tomorrow, he would end up being a top 10 NFL pick in a year. Because he's that kind of athlete. He's that freakish. But he's a guy that wants to be a receiver, So it'll be very fascinating to see how that shakes out, especially with Eric Gilbert coming in the fold too. So I muted you because I was getting a little echo. Let me unmute your mic here. Or
my back.
Oh, sorry. I think I may have bumped you by mistake. Sorry about that. I've got DrummerDawg. How are you doing, DrummerDawg? DrummerDawg, you are on as a speaker.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. I just wanted to get your feel about the quarterback room, being that Bennett's coming back. Are you hearing anything about any transfers or any kind of noise going on?
No, I'm not. I honestly, if you put a gun to my head before the offseason and said, pick who transfers out of the Georgia quarterback room, I would have picked Carson Beck long before I would have picked JT Daniels. I still thought there was a good chance JT Daniels was transferring, but there was a time where everyone thought Beck was just gone for sure. And so, I think him staying is interesting. He's a guy that we heard a lot of good stuff out of spring practice and fall practice last year. But I think that the big question is, like, does Brock Vandagriff take the leap, right? It's either Brock Vandagriff takes the leap physically and mentally with reading defenses. And I know that they kind of went through a process with him of revamping his delivery and shortening his delivery a little bit. And I think that that kind of that process took some time, and he kind of struggled with that adjustment for a little while. And then it sounded like during bowl practices, the light came on and he was looking really, really good. So I think if he's the guy that can come out and assert himself, there's a great opportunity for him to start. Again, like I said kind of earlier on, I think it could be a situation where Stetson starts that first game, and then you maybe see somebody else take over midseason if their play is warranting it. But don't rule out Carson Beck. I mean, I think the knock on him has been a little bit of related to sort of how he how he's like, I guess, just sort of his, I don't want to say he's struggles with leadership or whatever, but it's just like, I don't know that he's a guy that's really like taking control of the locker room, or, has been able to get a bunch of guys to rally behind him. And also, in fairness to him, it's like, it's hard to do that when you haven't been given a chance to start. So who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I think Beck is a talented guy to keep an eye on. They're all talented. It's just a question of who can read the defense, who can get them in the right play situations pre-snap. It's all the little things that, I think we as fans often don't maybe talk about enough or focus on enough, because we're like, we want the guy that's 6'6" and has a rocket arm and has some escapability from the pocket, which Brock Vandegrift is a lot of those things, if we're being fair.
Also, I haven't heard much about Dominic Blaylock really coming back into the fold. Are you hearing anything about him?
I mean, we saw him, get some reps in some games late in the year. And, I mean, I think it was on special teams he was playing at times at the end of the year. But, I mean, he went through those 2 ACL surgeries, and it's tough to do conditioning when you've had an ACL go out like that. So I think it's going to be a process for him, right? It's going to take some time, and we'll have to see kind of where it all shakes out. But at the end of I mean, you've got 9 months in essence, or 8 months. And so that's a lot of time for him to get in shape. I think that he is committed to being at Georgia. I think that he is committed to working hard. I don't think there's a guy that, anybody would rather see have a great season than him, right? And he's also a guy that, with the COVID rules, he hasn't lost a year of eligibility. I mean, like, with the COVID rules and a medical red shirt, he's in a spot where, he still has 3 years to play college football if he wants to. I'm not saying that's what he wants to do necessarily, but if he can stay healthy, I would think that he could definitely be a contributor for that wide receiver room again, because, Ladd is kind of, even though he's that shifty guy that you would normally think of as a slot receiver, the majority of his snaps in the second third of the season, or I guess the last 2/3 of the season, I should say, those came on the outside at the Z receiver position. So I think if Ladd is maybe, asserting himself there in a sense, or is going to take some snaps there, you still have Kyrus, who is kind of a Swiss Army knife. He can play outside, but I think he's a guy that you want inside of the slot. And I mean, I think a slot rotation of Kyrus and a healthy Dominic Blaylock would be pretty formidable. So it'll be fascinating to see how it all shakes out, because Blaylock was a guy that, I mean, really came on the last month of his freshman season. And it was a shame the way that it all played out with the ACL with him, because it felt like if he doesn't get injured, he might be kind of right there with Pickens heading to the NFL draft and looking at being a high round pick. So for sure pulling for him.
Is that sort of the same situation with Rosemead Jack Saint, kind of just working back from an injury, trying to get back into the fold?
Yeah, I mean, Rosemead had the big injury, the broken leg in the Florida game, obviously. And then this offseason, it seemed like he was in a really good place going into fall camp, and then kind of just kept getting dinged up and was never 100% healthy this year. I think he had a hamstring maybe at one point, or just kind of some nagging stuff that kept him from ever really flashing. But you look at a guy that, I mean, I don't know. I don't think we saw him get a target after the Missouri game. I could be totally wrong, but I don't remember him catching a pass after the Missouri game. But, you know, on the biggest play of the season for Georgia on offense, maybe that the Brock Bowers touchdown in the national title game, he's out there winning his one-on-one block, pushing his guy 15 yards deep into the paint of the end zone. And, you know, so, I mean, he's like, you talk about a guy that's engaged and doing all the right things, and that a coaching staff is going to want to reward with some targets for doing the dirty work. He definitely fits that bill. And I mean, he's a guy too that I think, like, I loved him as a recruit. He has freakishly large hands. People that have shook his hand before, like, you know, even guys that are recruiting reporters and are, you know, at those events all the time, have told me, you know, he may be like the largest hands they've ever seen on a wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, a guy that just can, big catch radius, can do things that that really will, you know, make your jaw drop in terms of highlight stuff. But another guy who just needs to have a good, healthy offseason and get back in that conditioning. And I think that he's a guy that, you know, Georgia's probably relying on with Burton having left the program.
All right, man. Appreciate your analysis, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for jumping in. All right, Dog Stats. I know you have a question from Twitter or from YouTube for us, so I'm inviting you to speak. Make sure you look at your DMs. I have Ben Frost here. Let's add you as a speaker. Ben, you are on.
Hey, what's up, Graham? Appreciate you having the space tonight.
Absolutely.
This might be a little off topic, but I heard, obviously, A.D. Mitchell, from everything we know, is just heading into his like true sophomore year, had a great freshman year. But then I saw something that he might, between his like movement in high school between Texas and Tennessee, he might have like graduated a year ahead of when he enrolled in Georgia, and he's actually heading into his third year out of high school. That might just be some random thing on a message board, but have you heard anything like that? Or
I know he's older, so that wouldn't surprise me. I think he is. I mean, I think he's 20 or 21 years old already. So that wouldn't shock me. Let's see. His when is his birthday? Yeah, I would have to ask somebody. It looks like he did not play high school football in 2020. So that would make sense. But 2019 was his junior season. I think 2020 he just didn't play high school, maybe because of some COVID stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that he graduated in 2019. He would have had to have graduated in 2019, but that stuff can be tricky with credits and, you know, all that. So I'd have to ask somebody that's a little more familiar with his situation. Actually, I got a text from somebody that's listening in right now. Yeah, so he's still. It looks like he's still a 3-year guy. So Georgia should have 2 more seasons of him.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That made sense. And given his recruiting profile, like there wouldn't be a lot of coverage. I just saw that gap in high school too.
For sure.
Any expectations for him? I mean, he got a lot of playing time. He not struggled, but he had a few drops kind of on some catchable balls, and then obviously had a great like end of the postseason. How are we feeling about him on kind of that X receiver one-on-one against in the SEC?
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, I think he's like, his route running ability is very, very mature for a guy his age, and, you know, for a true freshman. You saw the catch radius at times. You know, you saw what he can do on some balls down the field. I think the one thing that never really clicked this season, and it's kind of impossible for us to know if it was a quarterback issue or a wide receiver issue or both at times. But the timing on some of those kind of stop fade routes to the sideline never really developed between him and Stetson. It was something that they tried to run at a lot of junctures throughout the season, but you never really saw it fully click. But I do think that, that's something that just takes work and practice, and those two guys getting on the same page and getting used to kind of dancing with each other, for, lack of a better term. So I would expect him to be, a starter for Georgia next year. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. He started for Georgia this season as a true freshman. So I think the expectations for him are sky high, just because, he can go downfield. He can catch balls over guys' heads and win 50-50 shots down the sideline, but he also can do a lot of great things in tight spaces. You go look at his touchdown against Auburn, that little kind of sling route he did out there. He's got very good footwork, and so I think Georgia can use him in 3rd and 4, and they can use him in 1st and 10.
Well, feel the same. Got excited for this team coming up young. Got a lot of potential to see how kind of they improve throughout the year. Kind of see what the coaches are up to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think if you're a Georgia fan, you just broke the drought, and would it be great for Georgia to repeat or, go on another run next season? Absolutely. But if I can kind of put on my fan hat, there's part of me that's like, man, if Georgia goes, 10-2 next year, but they get a lot of these young guys into the fold and, get them the experience they're going to need to come back hungry in 2023 and make a real run at it, and then that's great. And that sets you up really well as a program. So I think it'll be as much as everyone has loved Jordan Davis and, the Nakobe Dean and some of these guys that have been stalwarts of their positions for 3 and 4 years. The exciting thing and the fun thing about college football is that, we get fresh faces. You don't have 20-year starters in college football. So it'll be a lot of fun to see what some of these guys can do, because, we've all followed them as recruits and watched their progress.
Well, feel the same. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, Ben, have a good one, man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, against my better judgment, I'm going to add Craig Lawson in here. I know he's going to yell at me for something I've said that he disagrees with, but I'm feeling strong tonight, so I'm ready for it. Craig, how's it going, buddy?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me? How
Yes,
you doing,
sir.
man?
Good, buddy. I was just giving you a hard time. How are you?
So it cut out. I missed it.
I was just joking.
So, okay. Well, in all seriousness, I was going to ask, do you think if Georgia doesn't repeat that Kirby Smart should be fired? Because I thought I saw you tweet that earlier.
What?
I'm just messing with you. I'm messing with you back.
I'm sure somebody has said it.
So it's probably out there. So I've been kind of mulling over because there's a lot of stuff y'all are hitting on that is interesting, and I'd like to get your take on. But since we're talking about receivers, all right, let's imagine that everybody's healthy. So Arian Smith, the fastest man in college football, Dominique Blaylock, who was a starter as I recall as a true freshman or a big time contributor.
Right.
Yeah. Rosemy Jackson, he low-key had one of the best catches of the season. I think it was against Missouri, where
on the sideline.
where the defensive back went. I mean, it should have been a deflected pass, and he just, like you said, used those huge hands. Art Gilbert. I mean, I don't know if I haven't heard any update on him. I assume there is not one at this point, and probably won't be for a while. And then you got the 2 freshmen who started this year. And then our leading receiver, Brock Bowers, and then there's also Darnell Washington. But just keeping it to the receivers, I think we know who the top 2 tight ends are. Who do you think, if you had to name, 2 outside guys and a slot, who do you think and then Kyrus Jackson, who led us in receiving year before last, or 2 years ago, I don't know. But who do you think the top 3 guys would be if everybody is healthy does it matter who the quarterback is to you in that scenario? How would you see that playing out if we're so lucky?
You're talking about this past season or the one?
No, the
coming
one
up?
coming up. If everybody is healthy, does it depend on who emerges as the starting quarterback, or like who do you think the top 3 guys would be? 2 on the outside and 1 in the slot.
Oh man, I think that, you know, on the receiving side, I mean, if Eric Gilbert's healthy, if he's healthy and he's ready to go and he's in full form, then he's one of your guys on the outside. That feels pretty obvious to me. I think your other outside guy is AD Mitchell, and then in the slot, I guess Ladd.
There's so many guys, but
there's a lot of guys, yeah. And I mean, I think, like, I don't think I've tweeted this because I think it would probably stir up a bunch of shit, and as much as I enjoy doing that, sometimes I try to avoid it at others. But I truthfully think if Arian Smith ever has a full season where he's 100% healthy and 100% conditioned, and can go out and play where he's not on like a snap restriction or anything like that, that he'll probably make a lot of people forget about the Jermaine Burton transfer.
Yeah, he's like Waddle, right? I mean, or maybe a step faster.
Yeah, he's a Waddle or he's not a Mechie. Mechie's a little bit bigger and stronger and more built, but I mean, he's fast. It's just, can he develop a full route tree and all that stuff? But I don't know that it really matters at the college level. It's just
go deep,
because right, exactly, going deep, and the fact that Mitchell or Gilbert is probably drawing the number 1 DB. But I also have been told that, I'm like, we haven't seen him play at the slot very much. So it's like, I don't know if that's something that they want him to do or something that he's willing to do, So I think there is like that question there. Cause I think if he ever decided I want to be a slot receiver, it'd be over with. Right. But even on the outside, his skill set is just so unique that you can just lob him up downfield and he's going to run under it more times than not. So, I mean, yeah, those would be my 3, Arik, Mitchell, and
Ladd.
But
has Smith played some slot? I feel like that UAB touchdown catch.
No, he was the only outside. I think he was on the outside. He was just
like
was
a
kind
short,
of a tight formation.
Okay.
Yeah, on the short side of the field. But let me look at his snap counts real quick.
Well, while you're looking that up, and I don't know if you can think about both of these things at the same time, but with regard to Gilbert at LSU, and it seems like forever ago now, did he line up? I know he lined up on the outside some. Like, was he successful when he was out there? Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, he was successful everywhere, really. But, yeah, he was successful out there. I remember distinctly he had one big kind of long downfield pass to against Missouri that he was out wide for, and just kind of, it was like a kind of a little bit of a modified post route, sort of like kind of seam over the middle that
from
he ran.
Max Johnson. Was that the quarterback?
No, it was Miles Brennan at the time.
I guess early on in the season.
So Arian Smith in his Georgia career, this season he played 5 snaps in the slot and 8 snaps out wide.
So few snaps. It's so sad, but he scored like 3 touchdowns or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yep. And then last season he played 3 snaps in the slot and 2 snaps out wide. So his career snap count is 8 slot, 10 wide. So yeah, I mean, if he's down to play in the slot, then watch out. But yeah, like you said, he's got 3 career touchdowns on 18 career snaps, and how many targets? Yeah, he has 9 career targets and 3 career touchdowns.
That's got to be up there in their percentage of like school history, I would guess.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, it has to be. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of like Justin Scott Wesley. I mean, Wesley was a very different receiver, but he was a guy that was like barely ever on the field for Georgia. But the times he was on the field, it was bang bang, big plays.
Burner. Well, real quick, and I'll put this out there, and then you can kick me off. But I was thinking transfer wise, and I don't know if you already talked about this. When I first got on, you were talking D line. I could see that potentially being a spot where Kirby would go get somebody if there's like an impact guy available. And I was also thinking that might also be the case at corner again, given that we have so much, I guess, inexperience. We've got a lot of talent, I think, especially coming in. And what do you think are the most likely transfer spots, I guess, or how do you feel about those positions?
I agree with you on the D line. I think if they can find an impact guy that they feel like can start right away, especially as an edge rusher, that would be a big deal that they would have a hard time saying no to. I think at the DB spot, it'll be interesting. I think that's going to be determined somewhat in the spring with as many of this class early enrolling as they are. Ringo's on one side.
Right.
You've brought in Dalen Everett. Julian Humphrey's a 5-star now. You've got Tyke and Christopher Smith coming back. So the question is, do you want to play Tyke at the star position, or do you want to play Tyke at the other safety position opposite Christopher, or do you want to flip-flop them? You can do a lot of things there personnel role-wise. But both those guys are going to be on the field. That I can promise you. And so, yeah, you're really left in a spot where you have two DB positions to fill. There's a lot of people that like DJ Daniel and think that he could be, a very good safety and step into that role that Scene was in without much.
Who could the other corner be? I mean, unless you're thinking maybe one of these 5-stars coming in.
I would think. Just based off tape alone, and tape is hard because these guys can be so much more talented than the guys they're playing against, but. Dalen Everett to me is just really impressive. So he would be probably the guy that I would think maybe could emerge as a starter. I think that if Ringo had stayed healthy going into his freshman year as a true freshman, he probably would have started. So it'll be interesting to see.
What do you think about Lassiter?
Where they go. I like Lassiter. I don't know. I mean, we've seen him on the field some, and he looked like an inexperienced player, which he is, which is totally fine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think physically he has everything that you want him to have, right? So I think that Lassiter could be a stud for sure, but it'll just be interesting to see how everything kind of shakes out and where he's able to progress. But I mean, if there's another Kendrick that wants to come to Georgia, how do you say no?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, unless they I think it'll be telling though if you see a guy hit the transfer market and Georgia's name is associated with him, and then Georgia doesn't bring him in. I think that will say a lot about their confidence in that defensive backs room. So I think that's kind of, the thing to watch after spring practice. But G-Day will be probably more fun this year than it's been in a long time, just to kind of give everybody a look at some of these guys that you haven't seen much of yet. So, I mean, that's something that I know I'm looking forward to is seeing some of those guys in action after spring practice and getting an idea of where they're at. But yeah, I would think that, before even the secondary from a transfer standpoint, I think that you could see Georgia bring in a transfer wide receiver. And I think that you could see Georgia bring in some transfer help at linebacker just because you had 3 guys that are going to the league there, and it just kind of messes up your numbers from a depth standpoint. So
a lot of
it'll be interesting.
Hardly any experience at inside backer for receivers. So we just talked about all the guys they got coming back. What's the thought process there with bringing somebody in just like are you thinking like a cager type of guy, or what's the thinking?
Yeah, exactly. Some guy that's, I mean, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a guy who's like a former 5-star, but, you know, doesn't have a track record. Like if Josh Downs from UNC hit the portal, then, you know, I think like that's the guy that Georgia would go and scoop up. I mean, if you look at those receivers that we were just sitting here talking about, what Georgia kind of lacks is that, you know, besides Arik, you don't have too many guys that have a ton of length and can go get 50-50 balls. So, you know, I think that's getting somebody on the outside that you feel can go up and high point, you know, that fade in the back corner of the end zone, those kind of plays. It would be hard for Georgia to say no to. And I think that you could probably keep everybody happy with the way that you rotate guys. So it'll be interesting to see, because I mean, my theory on kind of the lack of passing attempts in a lot of games for Georgia this season is just that, you know, it's a game control thing, right?
Right.
So, and I don't think that Georgia's going to be able to just stroll out and suffocate opponents and never give up points in 2022 the way they did in 2021. So I would expect that the offense will have to be more open, regardless of who's playing quarterback.
Right. Good deal, man. Well, I'm enjoying it and appreciate you having me on, and I will continue to listen.
Yeah, man. Always appreciate you interacting with our content, and have a good evening.
Yes, sir.
All right. We've got a question from YouTube, and then I've got my guy Stanley here, and then we might wrap this thing up. So Unruly Simian on YouTube wants to know who our best running back prospect is. I'm assuming that is, you know, on the entire team, which right now it's a tough to say. I think that Kendall Milton flashed and was really exciting his freshman year, and then he's just struggled with injuries and, you know, hasn't quite been himself since, you know, middle of last season. But if he's fully healthy, I think that he is a guy that can do a lot of things, and, you know, he can catch. He's a big back, but can still catch the ball out of the backfield, and I think that he's the type of guy that, you know, if we're talking prospect, I assume we're kind of talking potential NFL future, and he's the type of back that can kind of take the wear and tear of the NFL. That being said, just going based off of what we saw at the end of this past season, it's really hard not to be excited about Kenny McIntosh. He's a guy that we know can line up in the slot and catch passes and do a lot of exciting things out of the backfield. But you saw him. I was on our show, on Josh and I's show, on Dog Sports Live, on our film reviews. There was multiple times in the first half of the season where Georgia, in third and short situations, you know, went and kind of, you know, did these halfback kind of trap plays or halfback draw plays to McIntosh. And I was somebody that was critical of it, because I felt like if you're going to, you know, do these short yardage types plays where everyone knows where the ball is going, you should give it to Zeus or somebody that's a little bigger. And then at the end of the season, they kept doing those plays, and Kenny McIntosh kept converting those third downs. And all of a sudden, in the second half of this year, we saw him look really, really good in terms of getting yards after contact. He only had a few carries in the national title game, but one of the biggest plays in that game was that nice little creative kind of trap play that they ran after the big run from James Cook to get them down into Alabama's red zone. And, you know, he goes out and gets 9 yards on first down, and I think draws a face mask penalty at the same time. If without the face mask, he may have scored, but like, he was running through people, churning his legs, pushing the pile in the second half of this season. And so that's scary for defenses, right? If you've got a guy that is electric and, you know, can be split out wide and beat a linebacker to death in man-to-man coverage in the passing game, but also you put him, you know, back and have him, you know, carrying the ball out of the shotgun or or if the quarterback's under center and handing off to him and he can run through contact and bruise guys up a little bit, then, that becomes a whole different story. And his career path a little bit reminds me of what we've seen from James Cook, right? Like a guy who came in a little bit smaller, super agile, super electric, good hands, very versatile back, and then, is kind of bulked up and grown into their body to the point where you feel very comfortable letting them, gut up the middle, and they're going to be very productive doing that. So I think that Georgia has a lot of great options. I think Dajon Edwards is extremely underrated. Josh and I've talked about that on the show too. I mean, I know that he gets plays later in games when defenses are worn down, but there's a lot of times where, he's in the fourth quarter and he's running behind the second or third string offensive line and he's not really getting a lot of blocking help, but his vision is so good that he's hitting these little jump cuts and squirting up the hole and, finding a crease and breaking off these 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 yard runs. So I'm excited about Dajon because I think that Georgia's always the school where, they're going to get 3 running backs touches in crunch, in real game situations. And then you got Branson Robinson coming in. I'm on record of saying, gun to my head, no injury, taking any potential injuries out of the equation. Like, who's the guy that I think we're definitely going to see on the field next year from this freshman class? It's him. He's the closest thing to Nick Chubb that I've seen since Nick Chubb. He is built like a brick house. The dude, looks like a 6-year NFL veteran, the way that his body is built and the way he's been taking care of himself. And his tape is freaky and he's got great feet. And he's not just he's built like a guy that can go and bulldoze people, but he can do a lot more than that. He's very shifty in the hole and just really impressed with his vision. And there's a reason he's the number 1 overall running back in this class. So Georgia's in good hands at the running back position. I do think that, James Cook finally got the shine that he deserved at the end of this past season, but I don't know that Zamir will ever be probably properly appreciated by a lot of people the way that I believe he should have. You look at what he did in that Alabama game, particularly in the second half, and just the body blows that he delivered and the runs that should have been 3 yards that he turned into 5 yards and 7 yards and kept Georgia on schedule, kept Georgia ahead of the chains, kept them in a spot where they could run clock on that final drive before getting the ball to Brock Bowers. I think he was as much a part of that, winning that national title game as anybody on the team. So always will wonder what his career would have looked like if he hadn't have gone through the 2 ACL injuries, because I think that, he could have gone down numbers wise statistically on the level of, Chubb and Gurley and some of those guys. Cause really he never quite looked like himself from high school again until the Cincinnati game at the end of last year. That was the first time it looked like he had finally gotten that balance back. So just, pulling for him obviously and hope that he finds his way onto an NFL roster. But definitely one of those, what ifs with Georgia football that we all have. Hope I answered your question, Unruly Simian. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. Stanley, how are you doing, my friend? I know you've been waiting a little while here. I'm adding you in as a speaker. Make sure to unmute yourself. How you doing this evening, Stanley?
All right, Graham. How about you, buddy?
I'm doing well, sir.
Hey, great message that you're getting out there to everybody tonight and letting everybody pipe in and tell what they're thinking about this upcoming season and about this past season. First of all, I just want to go back to the quarterback situation. I know that Carson Beck, from my sources in Athens in the athletic department, he was going to get in the transfer portal. He was leaving.
Uh-huh.
But the thing is, the school that he really wanted to go to and the one that they asked him to come to backed off of him.
Interesting.
So that's the reason that he's still where he's at right now, and did not jump into the transfer portal. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that situation. Moving on to the coaches, man, it is great to see that we've got our former players back in Athens coaching with Will Muschamp, Coach Mike Bobo, and Brian McClendon. And Mike Bobo's a dear friend of mine, and I know some people don't like, when he was at Georgia about some of the play calling, whatever and all. But the guy's a great guy, and he's a dog at heart, and I'm glad to see him back there as well too. It's going to be great seeing all these. And the thing is, Graham, I mean, Brian McClendon, he's coming in now, and the number one wide receiver in the nation in 2023 has already piped up and said, "Hey,
I saw that. Yeah,
I love that
Ennis.
move."
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know that there's a guy out there that comes to mind off the top of the head that just seems to have quite the impact and effect on recruits the way he does, relationship wise. And one thing I thought was interesting about the McClendon hire, he gets rehired, and you see Todd Gurley immediately talking about how he's got to come back to Athens now, and Keith Marshall excited, and a lot of former players really excited.
Right.
And I think it says a lot about him. Just there's a lot of guys out there that are good recruiters that kind of, they sell cotton candy on the recruiting trail, and they might make promises that they can't deliver on, or they're able to say the right things when they're in home with the parents or the families or in front of the kid, but those relationships don't hold up well once that kid gets on campus. And it's a big art form, and it's a huge skill in this day and age with how hyped these recruits are to take these guys and really take them through that de-recruitment process and say, okay, we're here now, and we got to work, and you were this great high school player, but you have to continue improving your game if you want to contribute at a school that's playing for the things that the University of Georgia is playing for under Kirby Smart. And I think he's very good at that, and I think that is something that doesn't get talked about enough, but that's hard to do, man. It's hard to take that kid that loved you when you were, in his house and recruiting him and telling him how he's the best thing in the world, and then coach him hard and still keep that same level of affection and keep that relationship. And it seems like he's done that everywhere he's been. His leaving was on Cortez Hankton by any stretch, but if he has a stronger relationship with somebody on staff that he's able to sit down with and talk through some of these frustrations and all of that, does that play out differently? So I think just in terms of managing his own locker room, Kirby Smart made some hires that are really, really smart, but also, I believe, very intentional. And if you look at his track record over the last 6 years, every offseason he stops and he evaluates and says, what can we do better? And I think you looked at Kimber and Burton and, kind of this portal era and identified McClendon as a guy that could help the program navigate that better than maybe they have to this point.
I totally agree. And the thing is, too, you go back and you look, Graham, a lot of schools say, well, we'll take care of you if you come to Georgia, or if you come to LSU or Florida or Texas A&M, wherever the case might be. There's one thing about it. Georgia has proven for a fact that they take care of their former players. And if you look at it with Will Muschamp being back there on campus coaching, Mike Bobo being back on campus coaching, and now Brian McClendon, they take care of their former players. And, of course, Kirby was a former player, now he's the head coach. And look at all the former coaches, head coaches, that live in Athens now that wasn't there before. Jim Donnan wasn't there before. Mark Richt wasn't there before. before they became a head coach at Georgia. Now they still live in Athens. That says a lot about this school and about what these people offer to all these people to come in here. And they make them a part of the Bulldog Nation. They make them part of the family. And that's so awesome to see. And going back to the running back situation, I totally agree with you. Branson Robinson is a man among boys.
Yeah, he is.
And he will be playing next year. Like you said, Graham, and barring an injury or anything, that kid will be playing next year. He is unbelievable. He is a specimen. One of my friends who plays in the NFL now called me the other day and said, "Man, so this Branson Robinson kid," said, "Man, he's more of a specimen than any running back I see in the NFL right now." He said,
Jeez,
"This kid could play in the NFL right now." So I
that's
can't
wild.
wait to see him play and all as well too.
I
But
know. I think we may get a moment with him, kind of like we got with Nick Chubb against Clemson in his first game as a true freshman. You know, we may get a moment with him in the fourth quarter against Oregon if George is able to pull away or is kind of trying to run out the clock, and you know he busts a long one, or you know you kind of get that flash of what's to come with him, where everyone is able to get excited and say they were there when he, you know, ran for his first touchdown or had his first big play or whatever. But yeah, on all the coach, you know, I think that anyway, you know, I got to spend 4 years in Athens and it was a great experience and, you know, changed my life for the better in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's funny. I made the joke this week because McClendon was the interim head coach for, you know, at the end of the season
right,
when Rick was let go. That,
right,
you know, now all of Georgia's former head coaches actually do live in Athens with him coming back because you know he's technically 1-0 as the UGA head coach as the interim for the bowl game. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You know, I think there's some people that have the concern with some of these guys coming back. You know, what happens if it doesn't go well? Is Kirby going to be able to let go of his friends basically? But I think we've seen him let guys go that he's had strong relationships with in the past when it was time and it needed to happen. Coley was a guy, and Cheney.
right,
I know he remains close with Cheney for a fact, and they still talk
right.
regularly. So credit to him for bringing these guys back when it makes sense, because I do think it makes sense. It'll be really fascinating to see, I think, what would happen in the scenario if Todd Monken is offered a job that he can't say no to at the next level. Does Kirby hand the reins to Mike Bobo? Does he go the route of Buster Faulkner? And that's all to be debated and discussed down the road, obviously. But one thing I'll say for Bobo, because I am somebody that's joked on Twitter about like the play call and at South Carolina, with the screen pass and not handing it to Todd Gurley, or
Right.
there's little things we can all nitpick with any offensive coordinator, Todd Monken included. But hell, he took an offense. The most productive offense in Georgia history from a yards per play standpoint was a Mike Bobo offense. And when you go back and look at the personnel that was on there, and their recruiting rankings or their NFL careers and some of that stuff, I can promise you there's more talent in that room now than at any point when he was there. So it'll be interesting to see how his input kind of influences things and what they're able to do, because I do think he's a guy that is very innovative, very creative, and has always, I believe, had a good sense of humor about himself. As a student, I got to bump into him a couple times, and he was always very kind and gracious. So I wish him well.
Yeah, I do too. And the thing is about Mike, it's funny and all too, because his dad is a great coach in
Right.
high school, was at Thomasville and everything and all. But the thing about Mike is he'll be the first one to tell you, hey, ain't the best play caller in the world, and I've seen that through the years. But he's going to be taking care of getting our opponents up to
Right.
date. So he's going to be getting all this game film and all from our opponents, getting all that ready for our scout team and everything. And that's what Mike's main job is going to be. So I think he's going to be okay in that situation and everything. One of my friends told me, said, "Hey, man, I hope you don't try and recruit." He told Deshaun Watson, that he wasn't good enough. I said, "Trust me, buddy, Kirby's not going to let him nowhere near to where he don't feel comfortable at." So, but anyway. And Mike, he joked with me the other day when I talked to him and congratulated him about coming back to Georgia. And he said, "Man," he said, I know what my purpose is. I know what my job is, and I'm going to stay in that lane. I'm not going to get out of my lane and all." But
well, that's
Gordon,
great. I'm sorry, go.
Gordon, I know that you want to get off here and all too, Graham. I know it's late and all, but I just
you're
want to
fine.
say real quick and all, man. But as far as our wide receivers and our portal and everything, Kirby's going to do everything he needs to do to get that corrected. And as far as getting who we need to get out of the portal, he'll do that. I mean, he is the one that's taking advantage of the portal, unlike any other coach I've seen before. And I just can't wait, and then you look at the Super Bowl coming up. We've got Matthew Stafford and we got Sony Michel with the Rams and some other Georgia players, and then you got the Cincinnati Bengals with Trey Hill. A lot of people forget about Trey Hill, but he's with the Cincinnati Bengals. Played right here in Houston County, down here in Warner Robins, and played in our region with us and all too. Love his mother and daddy. They're great. Mr. Eugene just had his birthday a couple of days ago. Great guy and everything and all too. So I can't wait to see the Super Bowl and see all these former Georgia players in it and everything and all. But I tell you what, Graham,
it definitely doesn't hurt recruiting, having Matthew Stafford make his Super Bowl appearance and punch that ticket the same week that his old quarterback coach comes back to town. But I do agree with you on the portal, and if nothing else, Kirby Smart, has shown he's proficient in a lot of manners, but above all else, since he's become coach at Georgia, he has been an extremely good evaluator and acquirer of talent. So I think that, like you said, if there's pieces that need to be brought in, he'll definitely be going after them.
I totally agree. And I can't wait to see what happens next Wednesday on this, or this coming Wednesday, rather, with this final signing. And we'll see what happens. There might be some surprises. We always, see those surprises happen on signing day. So we'll see what else is in store for us and all too. But Graham, I just want to tell you, man, you do an outstanding job. You're to be commended for everything you do and keeping the Bulldog Nation abreast of everything that's going on. I know you got inside information as well too. You got resources and contacts is there. I was in the athletic department for 5 years at the University of Georgia as an athletic trainer. I was there 4 years, Coach Sully, 1 year with Coach Goff. And now me and my oldest son, we have a sports talk show here in South Georgia every Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And you've been on our show a couple of times. We so greatly appreciate you being and taking time out of your schedule to be with us now on our sports show called The Talk Around Sports. And we look forward to having you back on. But the most important thing, Graham, I can't wait to meet you in person, man. So either at G-Day or before then, you let me know, and we're going to connect. I promise you. But thank you so much for everything you do, my friend. God bless you, your family, your wife, and all. And we hope you'll have a great rest of the week.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words, and always love coming on the show with you guys. And like always happy to jump on there with you whenever I get the chance to. And thank you again for all the kind words, and enjoy signing day and the rest of the week. And I'll let you know when I'm in your neck of the woods for sure.
All right. Thank you, Graham. Love you, buddy. Y'all take care.
Absolutely. Have a good night, Stanley.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Well, I don't think I can top Stanley on the list of speaker requests there. Always a fun guy to chat with and listen to, and just a great enthusiasm for UGA athletics and just people in general, good people. So thank you guys for jumping on and joining us. Thank you to my partner in crime, Josh, aka Mr. Dog Stats. Y'all go follow him on Twitter at dog_stats if you haven't already. He's the one that makes all this stuff go, and figured out how to get us live on YouTube tonight, which is super fun. And if you guys haven't checked out our YouTube channel, Dog Sports Live, please go do so. Josh has gotten some good stuff up from the season and some of the kind of play resources and databases that he and I use for the show. So lots of fun stuff there. If you guys are interested in it, it's Dog Sports Live on YouTube. Yeah, and go follow him on Twitter at dog_stats. I might have said that already, but if I didn't, I wanted to make sure I did. Yeah, thank you guys again for jumping on. You got to love Georgia fans getting, all these people on here on a random Tuesday night in January. Everybody's already fired up for next season, a couple weeks after a national title run. Definitely a special fan base, and it's super fun to observe and talk about UGA with all you guys. This is fun. This is easy to do, so I'm sure we'll be doing more of this. Josh and I owe you guys a national championship film review, so we will get on that. It is on me, not him. As I mentioned when we first started, I've been dealing with some COVID stuff and getting over some sickness and catching up with some work things. But I am about halfway through our film study notes, so hopefully we'll have that for you sometime later this week, and maybe probably some signing day stuff. Be fun to jump on and chat about that a little bit. But thank you guys as always for engaging with our content, and appreciate all of y'all for following us on Twitter and sharing our stuff. And even those of you that, even when you guys disagree, it's always fun to interact. So appreciate it, and please keep it coming, and hope you guys all have a good